Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bollywood Cinema Club, a show where we take a look at Indian cinema once an episode. I am the host of the Culture Cast, Chris Stashew, and I am joined by my good friend. He is one of the co-hosts of Game of Bros, House of Dragons, a show on Weirding Way Media where you can listen to us talk about, well, what else? Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, your friend and mine, Yashar Pirasta.
Hello.
From across the pond. Wow, I don't think you are one, are you?
No, but I did some Googling because I was confused, and we can get into that later. I was like, what's the difference between just like someone who's Pakistani and like a Mujahir? But apparently they were like rich elites from India that left during the partition.
So speaking of the partition, speaking of the Mujahir, we're going to be talking about a little film from 1999 called Sarfarosh. So the film is directed by John Matthew Mathan. It does star the one and only, the sexy man, as Heather Drain would call him. He is one of the three Khans, Amir Khan. It also stars Naziruddin Shah, Sonali Bendre, and Mukesh Rishi. And the film is all about our friend Amir Khan. Who does he play? Well, he plays a cop who is tasked with taking down a arms smuggling ring, all the while becoming friends with a Pakistani singer. And, you know, as they do in these movies, running into and falling in love with Seema Nagrath, who only has Ajay's best intentions in mind. Also along the way, Mukesh Rishi plays the Inspector Salim Ahmed, a gruff, no-nonsense cop who has no problem kicking the shit out of people and shooting guns next to their head. So
Salim, the king. Hey, can we go back to the other? There's four Khans, right? You got Genghis, you got Donkey, you got King.
Khans, not Kongs, you fucking moron. Salim Khan, Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan, and Salim Khan are the three big Khans. Shah Rukh Khan and Amir Khan are the ones that we've talked about more than the others. So Yashar, you'd never seen this film before. Before we talk about the film in general, what's kind of your experience background with Indian cinema?
I'm not super into like Bollywood movies in the context of like the singing, dancing ones, but I've seen like a decent amount of Indian movies. Probably more modern though, like, you know, stuff made in the last 5-10 years. So I guess this one definitely has a bit of a dated feel to it, and I feel like more contemporary Indian cinema like is obviously very stylistic, but maybe less jarring than something like this or some of the older stuff is. Like someone who's watched mostly like Western stuff, or even like it doesn't even really compare to like Asian cinema, right? Like,
it's its own thing. Like, yeah. This is kind of the conversation I always have to have the first time anyone comes on. Is these movies aren't musicals. Music is always part of the film. Like it's not a musical. Yeah. It's a film that has musical interludes. Sometimes the characters are singing, sometimes it's voiceover, sometimes it's a performance, and sometimes in something like Dangal, it's not a performance that you're seeing, it's just the music during a montage. But that, I mean, even now in Indian cinema, you know, with a film like Tumbad, which we watched recently, that doesn't have any musical acts in it. It has no musical numbers. And you've seen Tumbad, right?
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, so... Right. Well, we didn't talk about it on the show.
You liked it more than I did, but I liked it. But
it didn't have any musical acts, and it's more contemporary.
had one. RRR just had one.
Right.
Which kind of made sense actually in the context of the movie.
Yeah.
Too.
But as you have clearly seen with contemporary Indian cinema, they don't feel the need to inject music as much as they used to. I mean, we would both probably contend that there is no need for the musical numbers in this movie outside of, you know, the opening song and maybe one love song between Amir Khan and Sonali Bendre. But this is an action film. And again, like you said, Western sensibilities would denote an action film is not going to feature musical numbers. But 1999 Sarfarosh would not be the case, which is why me personally, I love Indian cinema because it does just kind of exist as its own thing.
So we don't need Naseeruddin Shah to do like a whole 10-minute full song to show that he's a poet singer.
I mean, in a thematic sense, that makes sense, right?
Thematically. It makes sense to have the scene, maybe not the whole song. This movie you could have shaved an hour off. Easy.
Well, and that is the thing about, you know, this movie. again, it feels like it kind of falls into some of the kind of story beat traps of other Indian cinema films I've seen, where it takes a while to get going. And most of the time there's no issue with that. But in this film and in something like K3G, sometimes more isn't better. I don't need more. I don't need to know every single character's minute backstory. And this movie kind of gets bogged down in that with the amount of kind of tertiary villains there are, because there seem to be like six. Yeah, there's six. There's Haji, there's Murchi, there's Baji, there's Hassan, there's Gulfam Hassan. And then there's Sultan Deep as well. And Viran, who we don't even get a conclusion with. Like I feel like this movie had a good idea. I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's kind of a politically charged concept, especially at the time, given what was going on with the Kargil conflict right after this movie came out. I think this movie's a little long, but I think this movie is a very good movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it took me a while to get into it. And I think once like Ajay becomes a bit more assertive, like when he gets really into the cop thing, it gets more interesting. You're right. Like there's way too many villains. I was a bit confused on what all the relationships were, to be honest. Like the guy in the beginning is Viren, right?
Yeah.
And you think, oh, he's gonna be this crazy villain, and then you see him like briefly in like two other scenes or whatever, and it's just it seemed like it was trying to do a lot, and I feel like they could have tightened that part up. And the action is, it's okay.
Well,
it's okay.
I was going to say, like, before we kind of let's talk about the action movie aspect of this, because we have talked about other action movies on the show. Like you've already mentioned, we did do an episode on Triple R. We are doing an episode on Thugs of Hindostan, which is Amir Khan, Amitabh Bachchan action movie. The action in this movie is serviceable.
Yeah, there's like a couple scenes that kind of my favorite scene was when he's like fucked up leg launching after the guy in the hospital.
Oh yeah.
That's it. I want to also shout out, like, Amir Khan's performance was actually quite good. He was a bit of a blank slate. Like, we don't really know much about like what he thinks, other than he's like has a strong sense of justice. And also similar to RRR, apparently no one realizes he's a cop, even though like that's his full-time job.
That's that in these kinds of stories, that's a trope. I mean, that's the thing about this movie. This movie has like the trappings of Hong Kong cinema at its heart. Like it feels very much like a Hong Kong cinema film. Like you could take Amir Khan out and put Chow Yun Fat in, like like that. Realistically, like the story that they're telling is not
that kind of character.
Yeah, and I think it kind of underserves Amir Khan, because Amir Khan is so charismatic. He's such a good actor. He's still working today, obviously, still making movies that plenty of people are going to see. He's still venerated, again, as one of the three Khans in Indian cinema. It underserves him as an actor, because he's such a charismatic actor. It's like, don't make one of the greatest Indian cinema actors of all time into kind of this, like you mentioned, almost a cipher. Like, I find it hard to believe that he as a character is not in love with Sonali Bendra's Seema. Like you're fighting. I know, but he's like fighting. There's a whole thing about fighting it. And that's like another 10 minutes of the movie that kind of goes nowhere for no reason. And there's a whole musical act about, I love you and don't you love me? And I don't understand why you don't love me. And you're kind of playing hard to get. And it's like it's not a believable line of thinking in this movie that this woman is not going, like Amir Khan is not going to just fall head over heels for this woman. Like it feels contrived for them to not be able to be together.
Well, and they had this weird backstory where he was really into her, and then like she kind of blew him off, and then like all these years later, then like she's just like completely enraptured by him as soon as she sees him, and he's just kind of like, but I got shit to do.
Right.
I think he has it's not a monologue, but he has a good dialogue with Gulfam Hassan at the end that I found quite moving. But I honestly think the best performances were it was actually Salim. Mukesh Rishi was really good, and Nasreen Shah's Gulfam Hassan. Although like there's a twist with his character that was a little hard to buy, but at least they kind of just sort of justified at the end.
What was hard to buy about Naziruddin Shah's character?
This like essentially very like high brow poet type of character. Like what's Nora Jones's dad's name? Ravi Shankar. He basically like a Ravi Shankar type character, right?
Yeah.
Who also is like running guns and drugs across like the Pakistan-India border because he is upset from the partition from at this point probably like 30, 40 years prior. And I guess wants to enact some sort of retribution on India while also saying he like loves India and like his heart still. It's just like it like doesn't really make sense. Like he can't live the lifestyle he's living and also it's in such like such contrast to like what he says at the end of the movie. So like I mean I know they just did that for dramatic effect and he's a great performer and he has a really interesting look, like very zaddy vibes going. But
I hate that that's a term now because I was saying that shit before other people were saying it. It really bums me out.
Yeah, I know. Well, you know,
I'm ahead of the times as they would. I'm ahead of the times as they would say.
So, but I just want to single out those two performances really stood out to me. Salim has like a really moving performance. That dude's a big motherfucker.
I love his nose. Like he just has this like great like profile, and he plays kind of the heavy for Amir Khan. You know, he's kind of backing up Amir Khan and protecting him in a way. But that performance could have just been a mute, not saying anything, not bringing kind of any nuance to the performance, but after that first scene where he kind of goes and gets a bunch of dudes killed because he's a fucking moron. I
didn't know that AKs.
Right. Like that's fair that you didn't, but playing chicken with some like terrorists is not necessarily a great idea. But you see some kind of interesting depth to his character in the next scene when he's, talking with the cop and the kind of head of their department. And he's like, it's your fault that 3 people died. And he just like slams his fist on the thing. And he's like, all right, fine. You're right. Like, you're right. It is my fault.
But then he's then like accused of letting one of the guys go because he's Muslim. Like they definitely like play up the whole like Muslim Hindu tensions, which are obviously very core to India. But I think it's interesting with was not that like I'm super well versed in this stuff, but I know like Modi is really preying on that net and like contemporary, like today's India, like it's becoming more of a flashpoint again. So like seeing this movie talking about something that, the movie's like 20 years old and it was focusing on, a thing that happened like 30, 40 years ago. And then it's kind of like, it's this like never ending cycle. And it's really sad. Like I couldn't help but think, I had this thought, I was like, damn, how many people have died because of just in the history of the world, purely because they have not matched some sort of arbitrary demographic attribute. And and I think the movie actually handles that like at the end quite well. Like it takes a clear stance on like, it's a fucked up way to view the world, which I appreciated.
Well, and to your point, I mean, the idea obviously of, someone who is Muslim in India, leaving India because they feel unsafe, even though they're, ethnic Indian, religious Muslim, then having to go to Pakistan and then wanting to come back to India. I can understand the anger that you would have and the tension and the kind of feeling of out of place, really. Because again, like Indian society effectively forced you out, or at least that's the way you perceive it. So it's an interesting, what I would say about the villain in this movie is the way he's treated reminds me a lot of, and this is a more contemporary example and one that a Western audience could understand. He reminds me a lot of Killmonger and Black Panther. It's that same morally righteous cause gone about in the wrong way.
But it was also if like Killmonger was like, I don't know, in his day job, Will Smith as well,
Sure,
like,
right. If he's not forward facing as a terrorist, he's forward facing as an artist.
But like Will Smith, I mean, like someone who's like kind of revered universally, like not just like
it would be like if Amir Khan was a terrorist, really. Like,
so I think that's where I struggled with it. Like, it's not that I can't buy that, but it's like he's also living this life that's actually based on the embrace of, like, it seems actually like India embraced more than Pakistan in the movie itself, so it's whatever, it's a writing choice,
but it's a big part of the movie. Like the whole movie really does center around the Indian Pakistani conflict, or I guess Hindu and Muslim conflict about kind of the LOC line of control area between India and Pakistan, and kind of because again, this is taking place, the climax of the movie takes place in Rajasthan, which is right there on the border. Yeah. So it kind of is tying into real world events, but I appreciate that it doesn't make the conflict this kind of like, it's like world ending. It's affecting this kind of border region of India, but it's not like they've got nuclear weapons and they're trying to go. No. Yeah. But what's crazy is the Kargil conflict that would happen right around the time of this, movie coming out is kind of like what's going on in this movie. I mean, it's, pro-Pakistani militants causing trouble in India. Like, that's how the Kargil conflict started, was Pakistani militants coming into India and starting trouble. So it's interesting kind of how prescient the movie ends up kind of being for what really happens. But again, it's told in a way where it's not really tying it into the real life conflict, because the Pakistani government's not really involved. They kind of hint.
It's like a rogue general,
right,
and a diplomat. Like, I mean, maybe they have some, but it's not like the president of Pakistan is like officially sanctioning this.
Right. And there's nukes like in play or anything. Like I like that it's a small scale conflict, but because it's a small scale conflict, it does allow for what you mentioned, the idea that like you can have this kind of, I wouldn't say unrealistic villain, but kind of over the top high concept character of a poet who's also, helping the terrorists because it aligns with his worldview, I guess. Like,
yeah, I mean, and so like the movie like starts, the first like half hour is kind of just, Ajay just chilling and meeting this girl or reconnecting with this girl and becoming friends with Gulfam Hassan. And then it becomes more of like a traditional, not procedural, but just kind of like a cop gangster type of movie. But and you get like a lot of these shootouts. Some work better than others. But I think one of the issues I had with the movie, overall, I did enjoy it, was they did a lot of catch and release, where like, because there's like so many tertiary character like villains. Oh, they would go get a villain, they would catch them and they'd run away, and sometimes they would shoot someone, and like it just felt like they rinsed and repeated that same cycle like 4 or 5 times, and it didn't really add. Like, I was just like, okay, but how many times do we have to see these guys get in a shootout, and not much new is. I mean, there's a couple different pieces, like the one at the very end, and then like the one where he broke his leg. But I do feel like it was a lot of repetition there.
Well, similar to a lot of other Indian cinema films, this movie plays with, the past and kind of flashbacks. It's not really a flashback, but there's a time jump in the movie. Because like we mentioned, Amir Khan and Sonali Bendre meet as kids, and you see that. And then we see them kind of as adults, but they're not doing any sort of de-aging or anything. It's just, it's kind of hard.
Well, they were in university,
right?
They said they were in college, so it wasn't like that long before,
right? But again, like there is a little bit of a time jump. There's a little bit of time passing too. So I feel like the movie tried to tackle too much, is kind of what I'm getting at. I think it tried to be like a lot of Indian cinema, all kind of all encompassing. We're going to tell the stories of these characters. They're going to be fully fleshed out, fully realized. By the end of the movie, you're going to be fully invested in the characters and their journey. And I think you would probably agree with me, by the end of the movie, with the characters that were well written, that were given something to do, I was invested in them. Like Naziruddin Shah's Gulfam Hassan, like Amir Khan's Ajay Singh. But to your point, there are like 13 other characters in this movie that exist for no reason, or to be a minor set piece that is 10 minutes in a almost 3-hour movie that could have been taken out. So that's the thing. Yeah. Each musical number, each set piece is 10 to 15 minutes. The musical numbers get closer to 10. The set pieces are probably 12 to 15. You take 3 of those out, this is a much more evenly paced movie, I feel like. Because the first act, I think, is pretty good. I think the second act really gets bogged down in all these characters and just the amount of, like you said, back and forth and going to find them, and they're running away, or going to find them and we get one of them, but we don't get the one we need. We only get the one that is, the third in command. And there wouldn't be an issue with that if this movie spent a little bit more time establishing why these characters are important, but they did it with other characters. They didn't do it with all of them. And that's the problem. The characters that they do it with, all right, I'm invested, but the ones that they don't, and there are too many that they don't, is the issue. But what are you going to do? Kick this movie out another 20 minutes, 30 minutes? I mean, again, K3G is 3.5 hours long. I think by the end of that movie, Jess and Maggie and I were in the camp of that movie probably could have had 30 minutes taken out of it, because there's a character in that movie that doesn't really serve the narrative overall. This movie has a similar problem. It's a very good movie. It's a fun movie, but it just tries to do way too much with these characters. I don't need 8 sub-villains. The 1 or 2 villains is enough. And even the villains that we get at the end of the movie, they kind of only show up in the third act. At least the Pakistani general just kind of shows up in the third act, and you're like,
it's the general we do see like near the beginning, and the ambassador briefly, and then the ambassador shows up again at the like nice dinner thing. But like it does take us a while to be like, who is this guy? Like, because we spend like a minute with him, or 2,
right? And
then he becomes like kind of an important character because he's like a diplomat. He pulls out the diplomatic community. Shout out to Lethal Weapon, I think 2.
2. I was about to say that. I was waiting for the screw your diplomatic immunity.
Yeah.
Consider it revoked. I was waiting for Amir Khan to say that.
Yeah. So I think they took that from there.
I mean, if they didn't, then there's no way, right? Like,
and the Seema character, like, she was okay, but she also doesn't. Like, they don't really know what to do with her. Like, the first, 30 minutes, you're like, okay. And then she just kind of becomes just, like, dressing, which, it's not... I'm not saying every character needs to be fleshed out, but they actually do make us spend a lot of time with her early on and try to make us care about her. And then she's just kind of like, they don't know what to do with her, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, again, when you're watching an Indian cinema film, it's an event, right? You're going with your whole family to the theater to watch it. So they feel like... They being the film creators, I assume, because again, I've seen this now so many times watching these movies, they feel like they need to kind of serve all audiences. And so you've got the action. You do have some comedy in this movie, some kind of slapsticky stuff, but it doesn't need the romantic subplot. Like, it's completely underserved by the movie. Like you said, I mean, the way the movie ends is abrupt, to say the least, but we do get kind of it is abrupt. It's abrupt, but we do get kind of a scene of closure between Amir Khan and Sonali Bendre. But throughout the movie, I don't care about their relationship because it's so paper thin. I'm not even sure how much I care about Amir Khan's relationship with his family. That should be the relationship that we are invested in, because again, we see his dad get kidnapped at the beginning of the movie. And because his dad gets kidnapped, his brother dies because of it. His brother gets killed by, essentially not on purpose, but his dad is going to testify against these arms smugglers. And so the arms smugglers know that he's going to testify. So as he's being driven to court to testify on the back of a motorcycle, Amir Khan's dad gets kidnapped off the back. And in kidnapping his dad, the motorcycle just falls over and his brother breaks his neck, I guess, is what we're being led to believe. But like, that should have been the emotional core of the movie, was Amir Khan avenging his family because his dad gets tortured into becoming mute, I guess, or beaten up so badly he becomes like, I don't understand.
He's just like disabled. They don't really get to accept, like, it doesn't really matter what. It's basically something bad happened and it inspired him to become a cop, but not just like take like a cushy job, but like be like a real like hard ass.
Right.
Like, that's the thing you get, is like he doesn't want to just like be in a comfortable status driven job. He wants to like be there on the beat, like fucking dudes up. They do a lot of fucking dudes up. They do a lot of like just smacking dudes around and just beating the shit out of like dudes that they arrest, which I find quite funny. It's obviously not what you want your police to do, but it is amusing.
to the point where there are two guys that have been kidnapped from a raid, and Amir Khan goes, shoot him. And the guy's like, you can't shoot us. And he's like, well, shoot him next to the head.
Salim's like, wait, you don't like really want me to shoot him. And like, it is weird because you're like, wait, he would never do this. And he's like, well, he's like, no, just shoot next to his head. And I was like, okay.
Just put the fear of God in him. Like, don't kill him. I don't know. Like, I feel like the movie should have placed more importance and more focus on Amir Khan's family, because we see them too. I mean, they kind of show up throughout. Amir Khan's mom comes and visits him in the hospital when he gets the shit kicked out of him. The first of like many times he gets the shit kicked out of him in this movie.
He gets beat up in front of them too. Like,
right.
That's like a big scene.
I just it's weird to me because, again, like, Seema is not even on the poster for the movie. The poster for the movie features Naziruddin Shah, Amir Khan, and Mukesh Rishi. So it's kind of weird to me. It doesn't add anything to the movie. Her character doesn't add anything, and she could have. There was this moment at the beginning of the movie where she gets into the car with someone, and I was like, okay, is she going to be like involved in the plot somehow? Is Gulfam Hassan her dad or something? Because again, why not make that the case? Why not make it the case that Gulfam Hassan is her dad? And, I don't know, just give her a connection to the story holistically, more so than she's in love with Amir Khan.
She is the introduction to Gulfam Hassan,
but she's not connected beyond that though.
Yeah. No, she looks good though in the movie. I'll give her that.
And the musical numbers aren't bad, but almost all the musical numbers exist because of her character. That's kind of the issue with this movie that you kind of already mentioned is, again, neither one of us have any issue with musical numbers. I have no issue with musical numbers in Indian cinema. Obviously, I love Indian cinema, but I would contend that some Indian cinema films don't necessarily need them. And this is a prime example. I think if you take her character out, and in taking her character out, the musical numbers come out, that's like 45 minutes of this movie gone. And then it's a 2-hour movie. And it's probably a little bit better paced. It's probably a little bit better written because you don't have to take part of the story and give it to her character or involve her character in a really ham-fisted way, which is actually more what it is than anything else. I'm kind of surprised she didn't get kidnapped at the end of the movie and held hostage. Like that's the level of kind of uncreative writing with her character that I was expecting. That I was expecting her to be the damsel in distress and Amir Khan was going to have to save her. And to be fair, if you're going to introduce a character in this kind of movie, how isn't that what they did, frankly?
It's I don't know. Maybe they had another idea. It's like part wants her more fleshed out. The other part like wants less because just the movie is so long. So
it's so long almost because of her character solely. Because I don't think any of the stuff with Amir. I mean, again, I don't think any of the stuff with Amir Khan and Naziruddin Shah. I think that's rather entertaining. The stuff with Amir Khan and Mukesh Rishi is entertaining, but her character is rather underserved by the plot. And then you have needlessly complicated amounts of villains who have these complex working strategies together, and at some point they even talk about self-driving camels, more or less camels with autonomy that they can take arms across the border with.
Oh yeah.
This is the kind of most convoluted fucking plot I've ever heard, but okay.
The camels were dope.
Literally, they're dope runners. Well, they would be dope runners if they weren't running arms. So,
did you know? I was reading about the director. What's his name? John
Matthew Mathan.
And like it's weird. This was like his first full movie that he directed. It was quite, I guess, successful. But he's barely done anything after that. It's. Do you know anything about that? Bit odd. You would have thought he would have had a pretty big career after this movie because it was well received.
Yeah, I looked. It doesn't say much. He made some 2 other movies, and those movies didn't seem to be as successful as Sarfarosh.
Yeah, but even like the gap between Sarfarosh and his next movie was like 8 years, which is like
it was six years to Shikhar, and then then it would have been 8 years to a New Love Ishtari, which came out in 2013. But neither of those movies are action movies. Shikhar is a drama, and A New Love Ishtari, obviously from that title, is a a romantic comedy, probably, or a comedy drama at least. So
they're all romantic.
Well, when you've got this musical act in this movie as many times as we get, it's like 3 times we get the same song effectively. It's like, I love you and you love me. Like 3 times is more than enough. Like one time would have been enough. But the songs aren't bad. That's kind of the sad thing here is the songs are pretty good. It's just they don't feel like they need to be here. They're done by Jatin and the writing team of Jatin and Lalit, who did music for Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, DDLJ. Like they've done music for some of the biggest Indian cinema films of all time. So it would make perfect sense that you would want to get them involved in your movie because they have a pedigree of doing good music. That's the problem. The music is good. It's just, it doesn't need to be here because again, I think if the character of Seema had been a bigger part of the movie, I don't think it would have been an issue. But because she feels like such a tertiary character herself, I kind of am just like, this is not interesting. Let's get back to the stuff that is interesting. Let's get back to Amir Khan. Let's get back to Mukesh Rishi, because you're taking time away from them by giving her screen time, even if it is with Amir Khan on screen. And she's not a bad actress. It's just, what is the point of her being there? Yeah,
no, I totally agree.
Did you notice the action sounds that they were using when people fell down? It drove me nuts.
It just sounds like a bag of potatoes or something.
It sounds like Mortal Kombat noises. It sounds like fighting game noise. It sounds like a fighting game that you used the pre-made assets for.
It's like what they think people falling down sounds like, but it's not like. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but it seemed like the whole thing was just like 80, like it was well dubbed, but like no one's actually talking. Like it's clearly them going into the studio after redoing the dialogue. At least that's how I felt listening.
In a couple scenes, there definitely were.
Yeah. So the sound design was not good. I would say that
it was just like they used the same sound effect over and over again. Like it worked once, maybe, but like at the end of the movie, when Naziruddin Shah unalives himself, the sound of him falling down is that
himself.
That's what's supposed to untriggering. That is the same sound effect that they've used over and over again.
Like a shish kebab.
So let's talk about that last scene. The last scene of the movie, I feel like is really interesting. So you have kind of this Mexican standoff with Amir Khan and Mukesh Rishi, kind of with everybody else held hostage. Everybody else being the pepper vendor / fortune teller
/ was he above or below the
Murchie?
Yeah, I was like, is he more or less? It's hard to tell.
I have no idea. The hierarchy is unclear to me.
We need to get The Rock to give us the hierarchy of power, because I couldn't tell what it was. But
you have him, you have the Pakistani kind of the diplomat, and then we have Gulfam Hassan, Naziruddin Shah's character, and the jig is up between the 3 of them, and Amir Khan essentially goes, all right, Pakistani diplomat, kill Naziruddin Shah and you get to go free.
Because he's like diplomatic immunity, and
I can't kill you.
He gives him an empty gun and gives Naziruddin Shah a gun and gets Naziruddin Shah to shoot him for him. Okay, before we get into that, they're literally being shot at in Gulfam Hassan's house, right?
Yeah. His manor, his palatial estate.
Yeah, and Gulfam Hassan is like, you have no evidence on me. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, he literally just told the guy to stop shooting at you. They like completely ignore that. He's like, oh, you're right. We don't have evidence. I'm like, except for all of the guns that they're using to shoot at you. But anyway, I had to point that out because I found that absurd.
But I mean, they do kind of say like he's so rich that it like won't stick. That was kind of my assumption. I agree with you. It's a little hinky where they're like, you've got no evidence. Like, there's dudes with AKs here. Like, these guys are here, and he goes, well, I don't know them, and it's like, but they didn't just get here somehow.
Yeah, one of the guys we know like works for you. Like,
It is a little kind of, yeah. Murchie Seth is kind of like Murchie Seth, and the Pakistani diplomat being there. It's just like, that's enough. That would be enough for anybody to like know that you're in on it, bro.
Yeah, and there's like this through line that I mentioned, like with Salim, right? So he's Muslim and he gets shit from like other cops, other people being like, "Oh, you're not a good cop because you're not willing to go hard enough." Or even one of the people on the Gulfam side is like, "Oh, join us because we're Muslim." He's like, "Dude," he's like, Muslim isn't just fucking saying like you're Muslim. It's like you have to be like pure and
right, because they take issue that he is part of a Hindu police squad essentially.
And I actually really appreciate that, because that was like taking like a fuck you to like identity politics and being like, it's not about like what you say you are, what you think you are. It's like what you do is what's important. And then that was kind of a through line in his character arc. And even though he went through a lot of shit, he persevered. And then it comes through at the end when Gulfam Hassan finally we get, because we don't really understand why he's involved in any of this. And then at the end, he kind of gives his whole spiel, like, because of the partition, me not feeling welcome in India, but also didn't feel like he was welcome in Pakistan. He's like, I want like India to feel how I felt. And then like Amir Khan gives like a pretty like poignant answer where he's like, dude, he's like, that's just bullshit basically. And this is not caring about your countrymen. He's like, there's more Muslims in India than there are in Pakistan. He's like, what are you like saying? You're hurting your own people. And he's like, guns don't see religion. Like, we're all people, like we're all in this together. And I find that moving, because it was saying like, yeah, we need to move beyond this. Like this, it's a very specific to India and Pakistan thing, like this Hindu Muslim conflict, and like actually move together and like try to solve problems and not just continually try to put in these, it's like this, it is an arbitrary divide that's just consumed them for years.
Well, and it's an arbitrary divide between Pakistan and India. Yeah,
the British put. Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy. Just like something like that, like literally will cause millions of people to die, and it's like, it's not like a World War II scenario. Like it's for no reason. It's just like it's not like you're going to kill a bad guy, so like we have to mobilize. It's like, no, it's just because people are shitty and stupid and irrational, and other people like fuck their country and they're left to pick up the pieces, and it's tragic.
Yeah, I know, I agree, and that's why I was saying, like with Gulfam Hassan's character, like he has a point, right? Like it's not okay for someone to not feel like they have nowhere. Yeah. Like I was saying, with similarly to Killmonger, like you go about it the wrong way. Like you go about it through violence, through malice, through instilling fear in people and making people feel the same way that you felt, as opposed to rising above it and moving past it. And like, I think it makes him an interesting villain, where you kind of wish you had spent more time with him in the movie, but you appreciate the amount of time you do get to spend with a character who, again, he never really even gets his hands dirty up until the end of the movie. And there is that scene with the little goat, which is just kind of strange and off-putting, obviously.
Yeah, because they imply he hurts the goat, but then he's like, oh, no, I would never hurt. I only kill humans. And then he also orders the killing of a guy who failed him. But then when he shoots the diplomat, he's like, oh, I've sinned. And ACP Rathod, or what is basically like, dude, you are putting guns to people's hands and getting them killed. Like, what is the difference?
Right.
And I do think that's like it's such an obvious thing, at least to me as a viewer, but I think we see that play out actually quite often just in the real world, where leaders and stuff do that kind of shit and be like, oh,
my hands are not dirty because I didn't pull the trigger.
If anything, it's even worse, because not only are you putting the weapons in those hands, like you're the reason for all of this bloodshed and this death, and if like you didn't do anything, it wouldn't happen. So, and
clearly you're unwilling to pull the trigger yourself.
Yeah, and he calls him out on it. And that's why Gulfam Hassan kills himself, because you do see he has like some honor, and like he wants to protect Ajay because they're like friends in the context of the movie. And yeah, he's like, I'd rather basically die than, I guess, be shown as a fraud, essentially.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, hoist yourself on your own petard, I guess. I again, like, that's the thing. By the end of the movie, Gulfam Hassan's crimes are covered up. They're not.
Yeah, I guess.
It's not made clear that the people in the world of Sarfarosh are aware that Gulfam Hassan was doing all these terrible things.
like they do get like the other people that were involved, except for the guy from the very beginning, whatever his name was.
Viren.
So it's not like, yeah. So like, it's like, yes, people do justice, but they do kind of just leave out this like quite important person in the heart of the whole operation.
Well, they say like he just died.
No, they do say he killed himself,
but they don't say like. But they say he died, but they don't say like he killed himself because he was going to be sent to jail for being a terrorist.
They just said it's like a tragedy to like, oh, right. It's like, like Amy Winehouse type thing. Like, oh, he killed himself. Like,
right.
It's so sad. And then he wasn't involved in this. Coincidentally, this huge drug and weapons ring has also been busted right outside his house.
Well, that's the thing. I'm sure they weren't saying where they busted those people, because then it's like, you don't have any evidence, but they were here at your manor, sir.
So, like, I think the movie does enough to make us care about the core characters, and the performances are generally good. It's just trying to do too much. It's a little cheesy at times, and I think has a good message in the end, but maybe could get there a little bit. I don't know. Like, it would matter if they interweaved it a little better. Like, the Celine part gets it in there, but maybe they spent a little bit more time kind of talking about that. But also maybe it's just implied, or because of like the cultural differences, like they don't need to harp on it as much, because it's like, oh, you just know these things. So there is that. Well, and that is kind of what I wonder about this movie is, some of this obviously we are watching in 2022 again as Westerners who we just don't have some of the cultural guideposts here to kind of what was going on in the late 90s, and even what happens now in the areas of India and Pakistan, these kind of border areas. We as Westerners don't understand what's going on there. So I think it's interesting that this movie brings light to that while saying, this is a part of a larger conflict, and kind of, like you mentioned, the message of the movie is that the core conflict is the same regardless of the size of the conflict. Like you said, it is about, whether or not you can deal with or overcome or internalize the fact that you are different and may have been treated a certain way by someone, but that doesn't mean you have to inflict that same pain on someone else. And I think it's interesting that that's the message the movie has, because I was expecting a more kind of pro-India message. Yeah, it was very like
not pro-India, but not pro-Pakistan either.
It was very like, two-state solution, but like with cooperation,
right? As opposed to conflict along the border. Along the border. Yeah,
like his whole point was like this kind of behavior. Like, yes, it and he even says, he's like, because she's like, oh, well, what about what India did? That's a good point. And he's like, you're right. It was totally unacceptable, and it wasn't right. Like, he's like, yeah. He's like, so I don't want to perpetuate that kind of behavior. Like, we can put a stop to it. It's kind of actually, I think, in like a larger way of looking at like generational trauma that's like passed down in like families. It's kind of like the same shit, but like through a society, right? So instead of you grew up with a fucking abusive household or dad or whatever, or uncle, or it doesn't matter, and then you just blend that behavior and you keep passing on, instead of saying like, oh no, that's fucked up, I don't want to keep doing that. It's like, yeah, it was fucked up what happened with India and Pakistan, and like during the partition, and in like all the like separation and the persecution of Muslims here and the persecutions of Hindus there. And it's like, let's not do that. Like it's like, and it's like Gulfam Hassan doesn't even think, it's like, oh, that's an option. And that's like what this guy's been trying to do. He's like, I'm trying to do this not for Hindus, I'm trying to do this for like Indians, like my people, like everyone is my people if you live here.
Right. Regardless of religious background.
Yeah.
It is an interesting message to come from a movie with an Indian cast. Again, it is pro-India, but it's not in the way that you would expect. It's more holistically India, not, pro-Hindu.
Yeah, it's like we are all one.
Right. Regardless of India, backgrounds, regardless of the language we speak. You speak Telugu, I speak Hindu. Like, it doesn't matter. We are Indians at our core. Yeah. And that's, again, like, that's an interesting message to come from an action movie. Again, an action drama.
Yeah. And like, there's always people trying to like differentiate, like people call Sunni Muslim, or they call the Pakistanis especially call Gulfam Mujahir, like as if he's not like a true Pakistani like person. Like, like he is othered by the people he's supporting.
But he makes a point to point out that he's not until he is at the end. With the Pakistani diplomat is like, but you're a Muharji, and he's like, God, like, God damn it, like up until this point, I wasn't like.
Yeah. So they do highlight all the different ways, and even the Seema character says like, she's like, what is a Mujahir? Like, we keep like, she's not even familiar with it. Like, they're just trying to differentiate him in a way that like is alien to, I guess, the young people in that time.
Well, and I mean, again, like, even for us Westerners, it's really hard to understand what that means to be someone who is, you know, again, it's like you're Indian, but you're Muslim. Like you're displaced because of your religion. It's, I guess the Muhajir are kind of like the Uyghurs in a way.
I guess, but yeah, I mean, I don't know the context of the movie, but considering he did say they had that big like palace, it does, when I put in my little Wikipedia research, like I said, it did say like the Mujahir were a lot of wealthy Muslims in India that went to Pakistan to, I guess, avoid conflict or they were displaced. So it does seem like he fits in that based on his little background that we know, and he has like obviously a lot of familial wealth, or had before it was, I guess,
has this giant manor. I mean,
it's huge.
Yeah. But they're seen as the most educated and literate ethnic group in Pakistan. So again, it's interesting because I didn't even know the term before I watched
Me neither.
Before I watched this
never
movie.
Heard of it. Yeah.
And we don't really have an equivalent in our country.
Not of like Mujahirs, no.
I mean, I guess the initial pilgrims who came over could be considered similar in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
but they never went back. They didn't go. I mean, I guess some people did go back, but those people are now just considered like expatriates if you're an American living in Britain.
But it would be like if like a Christian came to America now and they were like a white Christian, but also like sort of not disparaged, but like differentiated. It is like almost like it's like a weird, because it's like a Muslim with Indian roots would be like most of Pakistan anyway. So it's like, it is weird. They still manage to differentiate themselves from, like, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's all arbitrary. Like, it's like
it's all the time that they came is what it seems like.
Yeah. It's like, you're really like working hard to like put people in these like boxes that don't mean anything. And I think that was what really stuck with me in the movie. It's like, we as a species, like, we'll just come up with all kinds of crazy shit just to say like, you're not like me, because it's easy for me to treat you differently if I that's how you rationalize treating people differently. Well, they are not like me how are they not like you? It's like, well, like, we're both Muslim and like, yeah, we're from this area, but like, oh, he came at this slightly different time.
He's from this side of the line. I'm from that side of the line.
It's just like, okay, sure. I hope you never take a 23andMe, because you're going to be heavily disappointed.
Well, and that is the thing, like you mentioned. I'm glad that the movie doesn't just leave it with Amir Khan and Naziruddin Shah. I think the smartest thing about this movie, one of the smartest things, is the Mukesh Rishi character being Muslim and giving him that back and forth with Haji, which I think is like one of the three kind of scenes that stick out for me in this movie. Yeah,
that was a really good scene.
Yeah, because you've already mentioned, I mean, you have this back and forth of like, you're not a real Muslim if you don't turn your back on Hindus and hate them. And it's like, no, my conscience is what's driving me, not this perception of you being Muslim and me not being Muslim. It's like, it's all inside. That's what matters, not what you're fronting as, not what you're claiming to be. And I think it's so smart to do that in this movie, because again, like, it just kind of further reinforces the point without really beating us over the head with it.
Yeah. And I mean, there's an analog to like America or like the Western world. It's like, oh, you're not a Christian if you don't support Donald Trump or like the Republican Party or like,
or Israel.
Israel. And it's like, no, it's like, you're not a Christian if like you don't support helping the poor or like, forgiveness, like the fundamental, like that's
the fundamental tenets. Yeah.
It's like these things that, in a lot of these religions generally have come from like a good place, and they're just like co-opted by these people to just mean bullshit and like basically get people to become mindless drones. And it's a problem, and it was a problem historically, and it's still a problem. And I think that scene like encapsulates like, no, like that's not what it means to be a person of faith, essentially.
Blind following of religion is not healthy. Yeah. But also letting your personal beliefs corrupt and twist the religious tenets into something of your own is, like you said, it's exactly what that scene is talking about. And in a lot of ways, the movie in general, it's weaponizing your religion to your own end, right? Yeah. Yes, Naziruddin Shah is a I guess he works for the Pakistani government. Like, again, like it's kind of
Under
hard
the
to
table.
tell. Right.
There's so many layers. There's so many layers of like people between I guess the most senior person we see is a general in Pakistan, and he's working with a diplomat. We don't know if it goes any higher than that. Although general is pretty high, but it seems like he may be kind of, I don't know, rogue-ish, or maybe like they're equivalent of their CIA, and somehow they've turned this guy into like one of their agents, and he's down with it because he's upset about how things were handled years ago. But
like, why him? It is kind of weird. It is the high concept part of the movie.
Yeah, and I did think, I was like, when they introduced his character, I was like, what is kind of like, he's cool and he's interesting, but it did seem like we're spending a lot of time with this poet singer guy, and then they have so it almost seems like they wanted to be clever. But I guess if you say, well, they really wanted to really emphasize this message of being displaced and, wanting vengeance instead of reconciliation and stuff, like he was a good vehicle for that. I just wish that like I couldn't reconcile it with the way he was living his life. Like I said, if he was down on his luck, or was not so embraced by the Indian public, I would have bought it a little bit more. But he was, the thing is, we're seeing him like so willingly embraced by everyone, that I was really struggling. I was like, I could get you upset, but like everything you've experienced now is quite nice. So where's all the vitriol coming from?
Well, and yeah, I mean, that's the problem when you have like a secret or kind of hidden villain in a movie, right? It's you see him in the first half of the movie as kind of this, exactly what he is, poet, folk singer, and then when he turns, it's like, okay, I guess. But it works because Naseeruddin Shah is such a good actor. That is almost the only reason it works. If it were a lesser actor, it would not be as believable. It wouldn't carry as much emotional weight.
Should we just call him Nazadi?
I mean, he's real
Nazadi.
Good. I like him a lot. Obviously you're opposite Amir Khan, one of the great actors in Indian cinema, and he holds his own.
Yeah, his performance and Mukesh Rishi, I think, actually had like the most emotive performances in the movie, and probably were more interesting than Amir Khan's. But I think that's more of a function of writing and direction rather than
right. So you've never seen any other Amir Khan movies, right?
No. So Lagan's been like on my to watch list for a while. Oh my
God, Lagan is so fucking good, dude.
I know, but
it's amazing. It's amazing.
I've just been scared.
Don't. It's good.
Well, I'm because of the length, but I say this as someone who literally took a day off to watch the Snyder Cut. So,
that movie is 3 hours of quality. The Snyder Cut is not. Objectively, it's not.
Snyder Cut's amazing, but that's what this podcast is. Isn't Lagan like 4 hours long?
So what?
I mean,
you watch 2 movies, you watch TV shows. I don't know. How is the length of a movie prohibitive to you watching it over 2 days?
It's not.
It's an epic narrative. I'll tell you that much. One that deserves the time that is spent telling it. And by the end of the movie, you will be as much in love with that movie as a lot of people, myself included, are when they think about it. I've seen it one time. It's amazing.
I will watch it eventually. And the other movie I suggested that we watch, I forgot the name of it off the top of my head. It was like 3 hours too. Like, Indian movies are long. I get it.
Again, they don't necessarily have to be, but
no,
they just.
I'm saying
it's like I said, like it's an event. You go to the movies with your family. There's an intermission. It's an all day thing. I mean, that is you know what I mean. Like that's what it is. So I don't know. Like I love it, but I do understand. Like it is a big commitment. Yeah. So Yashar, final thoughts on Sarfarosh?
Yeah, I think. By the end of the movie, because of some of the more deep messaging, I ended up liking it more than I initially felt, like in the first half. It's not a perfect movie. It definitely has some stumbles, but it's an enjoyable watch. It has a nice message, and it has some like pretty cool performances. So yeah, I dug it. Didn't love it, but I dug it. I gave it 3.5 stars on my Letterboxd. I debated between 3 and 3.5.
No, I'm with you. I think, again, it's a different kind of Amir Khan movie that I've seen. I haven't seen him in kind of a serious role. I've seen him in Lagan, where he's kind of playing this happy-go-lucky guy who kind of falls into the situation he falls into. I've seen him in 3 Idiots, where he's kind of playing, well, one of the titular 3 idiots. I saw him in Dangal, where he's kind of a hard ass in that, but he's a hard ass in a different. He's a loving hard ass. This, he's just kind of a hard ass, hard stop. So it was an interesting role. Again, I don't know if Amir Khan, one of the more charismatic Indian actors that I can think of off the top of my head, one of the great Indian actors, is best served by having all the charisma taken out of his role. But I mean, again, this was early on in his career. But all that aside, I'm with you. I enjoyed it. It's a fun movie. I think that there are things that are definitely worth watching, definitely things worth talking about. Clearly, the performances are fantastic, but there's some stuff that I just think doesn't work very well and would be better served in a different movie or not in this movie at all. So on that note, the next time Yashar and I do an episode of Bollywood Cinema Club, we're going to be talking about 2021's Sardar Udham, a film about the life of Sardar Udham Singh, a revolutionary freedom fighter who had assassinated Michael O'Dwyer in 1919 in London. So it's an Amazon Prime movie.
They've heavily invested in like Indian like shows. There's actually a really good Indian show called, I think, Made in Heaven. It's mostly in English, but it's like in India.
Right.
On Amazon Prime. It's pretty good.
I'm going to say Amazon Prime and Netflix are a perfect place to find plenty of Indian cinema. Yeah. Sarfarosh, you have to find it on YouTube and then go about getting the subtitles. However you do that, there are plenty of subtitles. There are plenty of websites to get subtitles.
Yeah.
But that is the nice thing, is most Indian cinema is just on YouTube, just kicking around YouTube. I mean, the version that we watched, I got it off of YouTube. Like, you know, again, YouTube is a great place to watch movies. Not great if you're wanting to watch it with English subtitles. You're going to have to do a little digging, but it's not impossible to do. But Netflix and Prime Video, my God, are just full of plenty of amazing Indian cinema. And Eros Now, obviously, who Eros International distributed Sarfarosh in 1999. Eros Now is an Indian streaming platform. So
it's like Shudder for Bollywood movies, basically.
Yeah, but it's again, it's exactly what it sounds like. So there are problems with it because not everything has English subtitles. But again, also I'm not sure the expectation is that people who speak English primarily are using it. So I don't know, but it's kind of a shame that this movie is a little harder to track down because it's an Indian action movie from the 90s and it feels like it. And that's an interesting thing to watch given the amount of 90s movies that I've seen that are action movies that aren't from India. So, or even from the United States for that matter. So,
and I guess the fact that it has Amir Khan, like who is like one of India's biggest stars, you would imagine he would be more easily accessible.
Right. Exactly. I mean, again, like you said, I mean, Amir Khan, he is one of the three Khans. Like he is the world's, according to Newsweek, he's the world's biggest movie star. But I would be hard pressed to disagree, given that I know how big of a following he has in mainland China, even. So he's massive in China, as big in China as he is in India. So
I saw he has like some like honorary title from like the government in China.
Well, he helped ease. I want to say there was something when we were talking about Dangal about he helped ease tensions with China as an Indian citizen. So
he's just like, yo, he was basically did his job and tried to do with North Korea.
Well, again, he's Amir Khan, so he's actually doing it out of the goodness of his heart, not because he's a total narcissist. So at least that's my perception of Amir Khan. I've never heard anything bad about Amir Khan, but other than maybe I'm not a fan of his, but I've never heard like terrible things about him. So until then, you can find this show over at BollywoodCinemaClub.com, and you can find all of the shows at the Weirding Way Media Network, including the Culture Cast, where the Bollywood Cinema Club effectively got its start, over at WeirdingWayMedia.com. With 20 plus shows, if you can't find a show to listen to over at Weirding Way Media, maybe you shouldn't be listening to it. Until then, Yashar, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. I had fun too.
And we'll catch you on the next episode.